for an incredibly beautiful paper. This has been a class act in autoethnography, as well as just an incredibly delicate intervention in bringing what's clearly been a very, very intimate experience into the world of the scholarly domain. I think I can probably speak for all of us in offering an appreciation of the generosity of particularly sharing that highly personal journey with us in this way. I was really struck by many things that you mentioned, but just to touch on one point, you made this beautiful comment that what photographs portray is less important than what they stimulate us to imagine. And I think in some ways that distills that ampleness and that openness and the plasticity of that interaction with photography that you're inviting us all to think about. So we have perhaps 20 minutes for questions or discussions or comments for Paolo. So please come forth with your hands. You've given us such a meditative journey. It's not a paper that really invites interrogation or questioning in some ways. I think that's partly what's going on here. We have David firstly at the back here. Just project your voice, David.
Right. Well, thanks very much. I really appreciate the whole thing. And I've been thinking a lot about the abject in my own work, which is not a relationship. The abject is sort of the confounding of the relationship to the other or the object. But the abject is there too in the moment of death, the moment of wanting to reach out to a corpse and not being able to. So I just would like to hear more about what are the layers in the relationship that is enabled and cut short there with a photograph.
Could you just kind of spin a bit further on the abject? I don't know whether I kind of get to a point.
I think about it specifically through Julia Kristeva, and she describes this moment of creepiness is a good word for it. This moment of jarringness in our relationship to it. Among many things, the quintessential example of the abject is our relationship with the corpse. Yeah. It's where an object should be, but it's not. And it's where a subject should be, but it's not. So the abject is the impossibility of our usual relationship between subject and object, or self and other. And so I would love to hear, because you're in a way making a different sort of argument that relationships persist. And it's a much more optimistic argument than Kristeva's, where relationships are almost never possible. So I was wondering if you could tell a bit more about how and when the relationship is able to persist and where, if there are moments where it can't, where does the relationship live and where does it not?
Yeah. Well, that's exactly where I don't have any good kind of answer to give. I love the question, I must say, and that really takes me to the heart of one difficulty. That's why I ended up rereading a lot of Paul Stoller, whose work I adore, because the question that of course no one raised it because I never presented this in public before, but I kind of raise it with myself, is this question that is this a matter of fate? So is that kind of sense of something positive? Is it because you believe that there is an afterlife or something? Which, I mean, I'm not a religious person in no way, so I kind of follow the route that Paul Stoller goes through, which is that of perception. Yeah. So and I can take, Paul Stoller has this beautiful anecdote. I don't know how many of you are introduced to his work, but generally he speaks about his introduction into sorcery, and they tell him okay, but so I spent 15 years learning to see ghosts. Basically, I'm making it very short, and he says, so do you believe in this? I said, no, that's why I spent 15 years working on it, because I don't. Yeah, but I had to teach myself to perceive that, to change my perception. So I'm kind of thinking a bit along those lines, and I'm really interrogating what I do. But I can see that in the passage of mourning, yeah, there's a lot of changes that happen to how you perceive these things, yeah. So in terms of this kind of abject, as you speak of it, say the relationship with the corpse. To be frank, I never had that kind of sense of distanciation to it at all. Neither in the case of I had the privilege of having both my mother and father dying with me, yeah, which is quite probably a unique kind of situation. Probably that gave me this feeling of some kind of a flow of events happening right there. So to me it was like kind of just a passage, again, from one state into another. That's Nietzsche's point, yeah, mediated by something. And the two dimensions of them were touching, which was very much there, and the images. Now, there's a power dimension there which I find problematic, because, okay, yesterday night I was talking to Melinda about this. I have one picture in which my father's arm is really full with bruises, and it's nothing, it's a bone basically there. So there's a picture of me holding my hand on top of his arm. And I was kind of thinking of using that just because it speaks very strongly to what I'm talking about. And then at the end, I didn't, yeah. And at the end, the reason why I didn't is strictly political, because that's a kind of an act of controlling his body by displaying it, yeah. So, I have that bit probably in common with Kristeva, in the sense that I sense that there is a kind of a tension there that happens probably at the level of control. So the image allows you to have that mediation, but prevents you from having an equal relationship. The act of touching was to me something way more natural, yeah, and it's something that I could delve in for as long as I could, yeah. But even that has a very strong politics to it, because the rituals. This would be really the scope for a research project on these topics, because what are the stages of separation from a corpse that you get through? Yeah, they are very, very set, very defined. Yeah. So I was in a place in a rehab center where they decided to defy those rules, and they gave me the key of the mortuary chamber, and I kind of spent 2 days in there, which of course you wouldn't be able to do in a more kind of institutional space. It's not an answer, of course, to your question, but those are the reflections that I get. That I hope they kind of talk to you thinking about.
Paolo.
Sort of a little bit of a related question, but I was just interested in how the actual act of taking the photographs interacted with your act of grieving, I suppose, or how you function in that space. I was actually in a situation last year where I was filming a friend who had passed away, and her, and it was, just a very, really sort of turned around my perspective of being of how I looked at photography and or filming, I suppose, and where that positioned me. So I was just interested in how, in that very sort of emotive circumstance, how
I think this, that's a good question for methodologies in those settings, because you can't simply photograph, you're not allowed to. So, the part which relates to my father was, of course, very open. So I'll just make it open to him. At a certain point, it made no sense whatsoever, but, until I could, so if you make a portrait, you kind of, like you do when you do research, basically, you never hide the camera from someone's sight. You make the camera as your presence, yeah? A la McDougall, I am the man with the camera, So that was with regards to him. With regards to the medical setting, this is Italy for you. You just have to do things pretending that it's okay. So I just got away with it, and I was quite shocked by the facility through which, there was a cart with like blood going through where they shouldn't, and I was just filming it like this, and no one said anything. Probably because with the years I've also developed a natural behavior with the camera. So if you kind of look a bit strange when you do it, maybe people react more. You're a filmmaker, so you kind of know probably the feeling of how you move with the camera. But I was preaching the law constantly. And then when I started wearing a live vlogging camera in the offices of the doctors, and in the emergency department and things like that, I was simply playing with the fact that no one knew what that was. Yeah? And then they asked me, and they say, "What is it?" I said, "A camera." "Ah, over." Yeah. So I kept problematizing it, but I was quite surprised to see how the environment around me problematized it much less. Now, the ethical question comes in as a consequence, though, of this. What do you do with these images? So you have to kind of have an account for how they were produced in order to use them. Now the situation of the medical setting in my case was also very problematic. There were a lot of legal things happening there. So as I was there, I thought I just collect them, you know, because I was trying to understand it. And of course, there's kind of an ethnographer in me that takes over and kind of wants to know more and starts asking questions, and but that became part of it. So, but it was an ongoing thinking about these questions. Entirely different is what I did at home. At home, it was really like, it's me, yeah, it's me, and then the home, it was an endless playing. Of course, the medical setting is quite different.
Saba?
Thank you so much for a really beautiful, thought-provoking paper. I was particularly touched by 2 points that you made, and I promise I'm getting to the question. One of them was about the life and death continuum, and I feel like you did a lot to give us a very gentle but deep kind of provocation on how to think through that through images and with images. And secondly, I really appreciated your labor in this talk and in this space to bring together both the materiality of photographs and the processes of photography. And so here I come to my question, which is I was really struck by your family photographs, the archives from generations back. And I wonder if you could speak more about how you have them, how you came to have access, how you came to mobilize them, and perhaps how you even think of your own practice in relation to that, making an archive or relating the existing archive to your own production of archives.
Good question. That you know, I just, I mean, with relation to those images, I mean, I just happen to have like the coincidence, the lucky coincidence that my grandfather was an amateur photographer and he loved photographing, so he collected a lot. I have his cameras. He had a Leica from 1932, you know, one of the first ones. So he was a good photographer, good mountaineer. So I have a lot of his material from the war. And so it's a huge capital, which of course got split up between different branches of the family. But a large part of it stayed with me because I was the only one caring for it. And I've been thinking about doing something with them for very, very long, but I kind of never found the way to enter the subject. I kind of took out from this presentation, for reasons of time, a whole other quite interesting negotiation that was quite revealing to me in terms of what other people think images are, you know, what their essence is. That's an aunt that I have who's 88, who's in possession of slides, color slides from 1938 or something. They're quite unique. There was only one company producing them back then. It was a company called Ferrania, an Italian company by coincidence. So they had them, yeah. So she kept them there. And just to see those pictures, she lives in Chamonix in France, so I had to go up there with my other aunt, who's a nun. Endless negotiations. So you know, I managed to borrow 40 of them, scan them together with Luc, my colleague, who scanned them properly. You know? And I started receiving a phone call per week. That's what I find interesting about these photographs. My aunt calling me, so where's the phone? You should bring them back. Isn't it time to bring them back? You know, of course I got a bit late with time. But what was interesting was that I told her, listen, I did this. I left them with my sister and her son. She's got a son who's 14 years of age. And then my aunt just blew up in the air, said, are you mad? You cannot leave them with the boy. What if he looks at them? I was going to see. No. If he looks at them too much. You know, so she kind of phrased this argument as if, you know, you were stealing the image by looking at it, you know. But maybe she was implying some technical, but she never phrased a technical argument, you know, then they get scratched. She said, what if he looks at them with his friend? What if too many people look at them? And I love that thing. So I've been trying to look at that. That's my entry to these photographs. I wouldn't know how to archive them, how to catalog them. I don't know whether I'd be interested in doing that. I would have done it long ago. But these kind of events and these stories, and of course, the death unleashes them. You know, suddenly you have pictures that you have to split up between you and your sister, or you know, you and your uncle. You know, so what do you do? Then all these stories emerge, and that's to me this going back to where you started from. This other side of photography, that's really the materiality of the photograph and the stories they evoke, the imagination connected to them. That's my take onto them. That's how I think I can work through. And otherwise, you know, you would start thinking in terms of creative archives, but that's. I don't think it's my intention. I kind of like picking up a few and working in depth with them. That's what I try